All right, well, we turn now to the next great dialogue of Plato's middle period. We turn to the Republic. It's in this dialogue that we see some of Plato's most original thinking being developed. The overall question of the Republic is the question, what is justice? What does a just society look like? What's a just individual look like? So as you can see, it's a question of politics and ethics, and Plato intertwines these with one another. He doesn't draw a very sharp line between ethics and politics in the Republic. Remember that Plato stands within a tradition that sees the central question of ethics as being the question, how can I have a good life? How can I be happy? And he also thinks that the good life is the virtuous life. At any rate, you can't have a good life without having a virtuous life. And as you can see, because of this, there's a role of the state that's going to come in later on in cultivating the individual virtues. So keep that in mind as you progress through the first part of the Republic. Otherwise, it's sort of puzzling, one of the moves that Socrates makes here. Socrates, who is Plato's mouthpiece in this dialogue, says, look, if we want to know what justice for the individual is, the first thing that we should do is sort of zoom out and look at justice writ large. We should ask the question, what's a just society look like? Then, after having done that, we can return to the question of what justice is for the individual. All right, so he begins with the question of a just society and only later on turns to the justice or virtue or happiness of the individual citizen within it. So following Plato, following Socrates, what does a just society look like? Well, Plato says that a society or a city-state should be organized into three different classes. It should be divided into three classes. And each of these classes is populated by members that is motivated by and marked by a particular virtue or skill set. So you've got the ruling class. The ruling class is motivated by the desire to know the true and the good. They possess the virtue of wisdom, and they want to rule in accordance with the true and the good. The next class of individuals is the guardian class, the sort of military class. These are people who are marked primarily by the virtue of courage, and they're motivated by honor, as well as needing to possess and to develop the skill set that is required for the martial arts. And the last class of individuals is the mercantile class. It's the remaining people who are motivated primarily by material gain and who keep the engine of the economy going. Okay, so you've got a basic division of the city-state into these three different classes. What does a well-organized or just city-state look like? It is a city-state where these three classes each do their own function. They each contribute to the good of the whole by fulfilling their own specific function in harmony with the other classes, but without interfering with the other classes. All right, so given that snapshot, we'll return in a moment to the just society, but as promised, I want to come now to the question of the just person. Given this description of a just city-state, what does a just individual look like? Well, Plato makes a remarkable move here. Plato suggests that there's an isomorphism, or a series of parallels between the society and the individual. So you can think of the individual person as a kind of mini society. In particular, the individual person is possessed of a soul, and their soul, like the city-state, can be partitioned into three different parts or elements. So the individual soul is composed by reason, it's composed by spirit in the sense of spiritedness or esprit de corps. So think of the passions, for example, here. And it's composed of an appetitive element. So the appetitive element is designates the set of desires that emanate from your physical natures, in which we share in common with the animals. So you've got this tripartite division of the human soul on Plato's psychology, on Plato's anthropology. Okay. That's a little strange by itself. You know, when you think of a soul, you're apt to think of it as being a united or unified thing, not something that is divided into components. Why does Plato suggest this? What does he have in mind? Well, Plato thinks that you need to do this in order to understand how psychological conflict is possible. It's a part almost of daily life. It's a part of everyone's own experience that we do experience internal psychological conflicts at times. You know, we say things like we're of two minds, or we're torn between two different options. You feel a moral pull in one direction, a self-interested pull in another direction. And so Plato thinks the only way to understand this is to understand the soul as being, in a real sense, at war with itself. And that can't be the case unless the soul is divided into these different elements that can be at war with itself. Okay, so given this, what does a just individual look like? Well, again, along the model that he drew up already with respect to the just society or city-state, the just individual is an individual whose psychological elements are harmoniously related to one another under the tutelage or control of reason. So a person who is just, a virtuous person, is a person who exercises self-control by ensuring that their appetites, their sort of fleshly desires, by ensuring that their emotions and psychological drives are all under the reign of or under the control of reason. Just as in the city-state, the guardian class, the mercantile class, need to be under the control of the ruling or governing state, the so-called philosopher kings. All right, so given that that is what a just person looks like, how can you come to be a just person? If that's what a virtuous person is like, how do you train yourself to be a virtuous person? Well, of course, there's an element of personal responsibility for your own conduct, but Plato thinks that the development of a virtuous citizenry is, in a very real sense, in the hands of the state. Now, you might think that because Plato's a Greek philosopher, and we tend to associate the Greeks with democracy, you might think that Plato is an ally of democracy. But as a matter of fact, he thinks democracy is among the worst forms of government. You know, in democracy, what you have is you've got the majority of the populace who are these uneducated people who are not necessarily fit to rule, putting particular people in charge who are going to then be motivated by demagoguery. They're going to say whatever they need to say to keep their own individual power in place. And so Plato thinks that democracy inevitably slides into a kind of chaotic form of government or a tyranny of the majority and so on. Plato's politics, then, is much more close to a kind of utopian communism. It's the ruling class, the philosopher kings, who exert their influence on the rest of the classes and on the society overall to see to it that the society itself and all of the classes operate for the good of the whole, and that all the individual people are trained up and allowed to cultivate their virtues so as to have a happy life. So this is why, famously, Plato was for censorship. You know, the governing class extends its influence over the rest of the population, principally through education and also through its censorship of the arts, of poetry, of literature, of music. So you want to make sure that no stories are allowed to be read or recited or repeated in which the gods are cast in an immoral light that would lead to a kind of corruption of the youth. You want to make sure that the soldier class are able to cultivate their primary virtue of courage by reading poems that cultivate that rather than instilling fear or cowardice within them. Same goes for music and all the rest of the arts. So as you can see, for Plato's overall project of the pursuit of a good life, there's a reciprocal relationship between the state and the individual. The individual finds his own place or niche in society, given his own or her own natural skill set, natural talents, natural virtues, and contributes to the good of the whole in that particular way. But the whole society reciprocates by building up each individual person in whatever station in life they are and cultivating the virtues that lead to their own happiness.